frontliners are getting their COVID-19 vaccines from today as Singapore reports another 22 imported cases. Hey, well done students. The class of 2020 is setting a new record for O-level results despite the pandemic. And will this be the year of the e-hongbao? Banks are encouraging Singaporeans to ditch physical notes for Chinese New Year. Welcome to The Big Story, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Olivia Quay. You can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode. Now, 50 staff from Rensi's Bukit Batok nursing home got vaccinated today against COVID-19, making it the first nursing home in the community care sector to start inoculations as part of Singapore's nationwide vaccination effort. Staff in Rensi's other nursing home at Ang Mo Kio, as well as its community hospital, will be vaccinated in the coming weeks. Well, as you know, seniors living in nursing homes are considered particularly vulnerable to the pandemic. In March last year, a cluster emerged at Lee Amoy Old Age Home, where at its peak had 14 residents infected. 4 have died. Well, meanwhile, 80 home team officers involved in frontline healthcare operations received their COVID-19 shot earlier today as well. Warrant Officer 1 Muhammad Shafi Jamin was the first vaccinated. The Singapore Civil Defence Force paramedic is involved in day-to-day medical emergencies.
The vaccine gives me the assurance for me to fulfill my duties as a paramedic safely. As a frontline responder, I come into close contact with patients, and this will give them a peace of mind to know that we are vaccinated against COVID-19. The vaccine not only protects myself and the patient, but also my family members. My wife, also an SCDF paramedic, is taking the vaccination later today.
A total of 1,050 home team officers will be progressively vaccinated in the coming weeks, and the entire exercise, which includes the second dose, is expected to be completed in 6 weeks. 22 new COVID-19 cases were confirmed today. For the third straight day, the new cases were all imported. They were placed on stay-home notice or isolated on arrival in Singapore. The Health Ministry will release more details tonight. The number of imported cases has been on the rise, not unexpected, experts are saying, as Singapore lifts its border restrictions. Well, let's bring in Associate Professor Alex Cook, Vice Dean of Research at the Sawswee Hock School of Public Health. Welcome back, Prof. So since December 29th, we've been seeing double-digit figures in our imported cases every day. 42 were reported yesterday, a 9-month high in imported cases. But is there a number or a scenario that would point to the situation being untenable in Singapore?
So I think there are two main things that we're concerned about when it comes to imported cases. So one of them is the impact on our healthcare system. And so far, actually, the imported cases that we've been seeing, even though the numbers have risen quite a lot, it's not actually got anywhere close to threatening our healthcare system. I think that we have one person in ICU at present. And if you go back to maybe March of last year, we had around about 30 people in the ICU. So I think that we're very far from the point at which we were when we went into the circuit breaker last year. The second thing that we're worried about is the risk of spillover infections into the general community. And so far, although we've seen a slight rise in the number of community cases, but actually then the number is still very manageable, and it's still quite a lot lower than it was even as we were coming out of the circuit breaker into phase 1 and phase 2. So at present, I don't think we have much to be concerned about.
You know, there will be imported cases that are missed for whatever reasons. What do you make of the potential impact that these will have on community transmissions, Prof?
So we think that even with a quarantine of around about 2 weeks, some infections will be missed. We know that there are some people who have a longer incubation time. There's some people who will be infected just before they fly, so that actually they only have symptoms quite late on in the quarantine. And we know that the tests are not 100% reliable. So there's always going to be some risk of people emerging out of quarantine and then still being infectious or developing symptoms after they've been released. Now, we think that the current safe management measures that we have in place should be sufficient to mop up the majority of those. And that's one of the reasons why, despite the fact that for months we've been seeing quite substantial numbers of imported cases, we've not been seeing a rise in number of community cases that is commensurate with that.
Well, currently the same border measures and stay-home notice requirements apply to both vaccinated and non-vaccinated travelers. That may change though. So, Professor, should vaccinated travelers be completely exempted from quarantine in the future?
Well, it's important to realize that the vaccine is not 100% effective, although it is very good. The efficacy is around about 95%. That does mean that some people who have been vaccinated, especially early on after the period in which they've got their second dose, may still actually become infected. We don't know yet whether they are a cause of concern for spread to other people, or they may do. So what I suspect may happen is that as a number of people who are being vaccinated increases, in particular in younger age groups, when it starts to move on to the general population, that there will be increasing demand from people who've been vaccinated to get different treatment when it comes to the border. And there'll be countries that will be desperate to get the additional revenue from tourism and business who would be willing to relax their measures for people who've been vaccinated. It may be that people who've been vaccinated will still need to have an entry swab, but they may be able to bypass quarantine. However, it is likely to be different from country to country because all countries will have their own policies.
Right. Well, Professor, thank you so much for joining me today. I've been speaking with Associate Professor Alex Cook from the Saw Swee Hock School of Public Health at NUS. In other local news, 85.4% of last year's O-level students attained at least 5 passes, setting a new record in 3 decades, despite the school year being disrupted by Covid-19. Also, of the almost 23,700 candidates, 99.9% passed their O-levels with at least 1 subject pass, and 96.8% passed at least 3. These results have been on an upward trajectory over the last few years. Well, speaking of upward trends, 52% of students were posted to the 5 polytechnics via the joint admissions exercise last year, a record in recent years. And the Education Ministry said that around 45% of that group had qualified for JCs, which requires better results for entry. Students and parents interviewed said the poly route has become more appealing, with the government making more places available to those who want to upgrade their diploma to a degree in a local university. The pathway is also popular for working adults. Figures by MOE show that in 2019, almost 6,000 adults, including masters and PhD holders, had enrolled in the polys to take up specialized and advanced diplomas to upgrade their knowledge and skills. 100 double-decker buses with 3 doors will be deployed this year, costing the Land Transport Authority some $64 million. They will also have 2 staircases leading up to the upper deck, which LTA hopes will improve commuter flow, with those boarding using the staircase nearer the front and those alighting using the second staircase. The buses have a seating capacity of 17 on the lower deck, 50 on the upper deck, as well as standing capacity of 56. Now, this is a 10% reduction in capacity from the usual 2-door double-decker buses. You'll be able to hop on these new buses as early as the end of this month. With Chinese New Year approaching, the Monetary Authority of Singapore has encouraged the use of electronic hongbao as opposed to physical notes. Besides being more environmentally friendly, the e-option will reduce queues and complement COVID-19 safe management measures. Those who still want to give physical notes for Chinese New Year will have to make an appointment with their bank before visiting the branches to collect the new notes. People 60 years old and above, as well as those with disabilities, are allowed to visit their banks from January 25th to order notes. Deputy Prime Minister Heng Swee Keat stressed that international partnership will be especially important in a post-COVID-19 world as nations work on addressing the pandemic and recover from its disruptions. In his keynote address at the Straits Times Global Outlook Forum today, DPM Heng identified public health, climate change and digital governance as 3 key areas where this is crucial.
First, in public health. The COVAX facility is a major step in the right direction. With vaccines authorized for use and in mass production, the next step is to work together to transport them swiftly and safely and distribute them equitably. A further step is safe resumption of the movement of people by establishing common protocols and standards for safe international travel. In the longer term, we need to strengthen our collective response to future pandemics. Disease X is not a matter of if, but when. The second area for global cooperation is climate change, which affects all countries, especially small island states like Singapore. This is also an area where cooperation in science and technology can propel us towards a green recovery. A third area is in digital governance. The digital revolution was well underway before COVID and sped up during the crisis as life shifted online. But global norms and rules in cyberspace have not been fully worked out. International collaboration is crucial to maintaining a safer and secure cyberspace. We also need stronger tech governance to ensure that technology progresses in a fair and ethical manner.
Well, DPM Heng also fielded questions submitted by the public. Several were on the economic outlook for this year. He said the Singapore economy is likely to stage a slow recovery in the second half of 2021. And this is in line with the global consensus that the world's economy may recover in the second half of the year as a result of vaccination programs that have kicked off, giving hope that the pandemic could be better controlled.
With the vaccination that is going on around the world, there is a global consensus that the global economy may recover in the second half of this year. And so our central scenario is that that the first half will still not be very good, but the second half we may begin to see some uptick in activities. But even then, the world has lost a significant part of the GDP, and even if that scenario pans out, you will still likely be below the 2019 level. So we have to keep our minds open and watch for new risks that could emerge. But our central scenario is that we are likely to stage a slow recovery in the second half of this year.
Well, there was an insightful discussion where Mr. Heng also talked about US-China relations. And if you're watching us on YouTube, a link to the full ST Global Outlook Forum is in the description below. Here's a look at the global headlines. Indonesian Navy divers are closing in on the black boxes from the crashed Sriwijaya air jet. Divers had further narrowed down the search area strongly suspected to be the location of these black boxes. A rescue diver also told local TV that more human remains had been found today. Rescuers have so far found one of the jet's turbines, pieces of the plane's tail, the rim of a wheel and an emergency chute, as well as clothing and personal belongings from passengers. Flight SJ182 had 12 crew and 50 passengers on board, all Indonesians. Malaysia's cabinet is considering an emergency order for the second time in less than 3 months. This as the country's coronavirus infections continue to rise unabated. The Straits Times understands a special meeting was called this morning where the proposal that was first mooted in October was revived. Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin will hold a press conference later at 6 p.m. Meanwhile, Malaysia's Women, Family and Community Development Minister tested positive for COVID-19, the second cabinet minister to have tested positive in as many days. China saw its biggest daily increase in COVID-19 cases in more than 5 months as it marks the anniversary of the country's first recorded COVID-19 death. Shijiazhuang, Hebei's capital and epicenter of the new outbreak, is in lockdown, with people and vehicles barred from leaving the city. Public transport has also been halted. Following the deadly assault on the U.S. Capitol last Wednesday, Democrats have committed to starting legal proceedings in their bid to remove President Donald Trump from office. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi laid out her strategy in a letter on Sunday, saying that the Democrat-controlled House will first issue an ultimatum to Vice President Mike Pence to use the 25th Amendment to force Mr. Trump out of office. If Mr. Pence doesn't respond within 24 hours, Democrats will then proceed with impeachment legislation. Meanwhile, U.S. Army Secretary Ryan McCarthy told a Democratic lawmaker on Sunday that at least 25 domestic terrorism cases have been opened. Mr. McCarthy also said the Pentagon is aware of further possible threats posed by would-be terrorists in the days leading up to and including the inauguration of President-elect Joe Biden on January 20th. Well, those are our top stories for today. For more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below. I'm Olivia Quay. Join me tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.